尊敬的城东小院们，各位尊敬的嘉宾、女士们、先生们，取决于您在世界哪一个。
Dear President Chen Xiaodong, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are in the world, good afternoon or good morning. After intensive preparatory work, the Europe-China workshop on green hydrogen economy co-sponsored by Agora Energiewende, Shanghai Institute for International Studies, GIZ, and Energy Investment Professional Committee of the Investment Association of China is finally and successfully convening both online and offline. The COVID-19 pandemic brought major changes to how we work and travel around the world, as well as how we hold meetings. This workshop is a side event of the 2021 fourth CIIE International Carbon Neutrality and Green Investment Conference in the context of the COP26 of the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. To achieve the 2-degree goal, or even the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement, hydrogen economy, in particular green hydrogen energy, is a very critical link. Considering that the green hydrogen industry chain is far from mature, this workshop will focus on how a green hydrogen economy of scale can be achieved. Before the workshop, I would like to share a few of my poorly researched thoughts with you. First, the observable universe is composed of 74% hydrogen and 24% helium, but the Earth's atmosphere is composed of 78% oxygen and 21% nitrogen. The chemical activity of hydrogen means that there is no such thing as hydrogen in nature that can be harnessed directly by us. Second, our main source of energy is from a nuclear fusion of the sun, namely the fusion of hydrogen atoms into helium ones. Although fossil energies are hydrocarbons, they originate from hydrogen energy derived from the sun, be it coal, oil, or natural gas. Looking at the history of the global energy transition, the first energy transition occurred about 1 million years ago when mankind began to use biomass energy from fire, and one wood molecule contains about 25 carbon atoms. The second energy transition occurred during the Industrial Revolution more than 200 years ago, when coal ushered into its scaled utilization, and there are about 22 carbon atoms in one coal molecule. The 1960s witnessed the third energy transition, which carried us into the age of petroleum, and one molecule of refined oil contains about 4 to 20 carbon atoms. Speaking of the fourth energy transition, the one that we're currently in, it still faces many uncertainties. For example, the golden age of natural gas, as coined by the Energy Agency IEA a few years ago, is still in the air. But please note that one natural gas molecule contains only one carbon atom. For this energy transition, there are actually two certainties. However, one is that the electrification process is unstoppable, but electrons don't contain any carbon atom, and the other is that green hydrogen economy is inevitable, which actually has nothing to do with carbon atoms. Without further ado, I would like to invite the attendees on site and online to welcome with a warm applause President Chen Xiaodong of the Shanghai Institute for International Studies, one of the co-organizers of the event, to deliver opening remarks. President Chen, please, the floor is yours.
好，谢谢涂老师啊，一起来组织本场的讨论。那么时值各种年底呢，各种活动扎堆啊，又有疫情的反复，所以呢，对各位现场和线下的这个嘉宾啊，能够到来啊，表示衷心的感谢和欢迎，同时也感谢我们线上的很多朋友来参与。 对于这次会议的这个会务工作呢，准备呢表示由衷的这个表示感谢和这个表示敬意啊。时下呢，因为远在万里的这个苏格兰的格拉斯哥呢，联合国的气候变化会议啊，就叫 COP26。
At the moment, COP26 in Glasgow is happening, and even though
但是国际社会关于要加大对可持续再生能源的研发投入，加快各国经济向绿色低碳转型的这个紧迫性，这个感觉呢是日益的与日俱增了。联合国秘书长也
there has been an increased urgency on how the world needs to be taking urgent action to counter the climate change. And in Shanghai at the moment, we're also hosting the fourth CIIE, and President Xi Jinping had also mentioned that how China is going to be taking a proactive role in countering climate change. The Chinese delegation at COP26 is also working very hard to engage in meetings with delegates of other countries, including those from the United States. And so today, for us to be discussing the China-Europe hydrogen cooperation is very, very important. Mr. Tu had already spoken on hydrogen energy, and the world, especially advanced countries, have introduced incentive policies for hydrogen, which as a result has entered a fast track. This is going to be a major booster for the post-pandemic recovery, and relevant strategies and roadmaps have been developed. After evaluation, we can see that China now has the largest potential in hydrogen production, and it will become a very important way for China to complete its energy transition. In the 14th five-year plan, majority of Chinese provinces are actually working on the planning and issuing priorities for the 14th five-year plan. And so for China, there's going to be a new era to develop the green energy.
转换最终应用，所以各个方面呢都是密切相关、相互依存的，所以必须要设计实施一套这个非常这个可持续的。
The hydrogen system covers production, storage, conversion, and use, which are closely interrelated and interdependent, and must be considered both independently and systematically when designing and implementing a sustainable hydrogen economy. And for scale commercialization, hydrogen applications must expand its market, improve cost, lifetime performance, durability, environmental impacts, etc., while also addressing non-technical barriers such as norms and standards, safety testing, thus establishing a robust hydrogen supply and application system. For China and Europe, both are very important in terms of the hydrogen development, and we are cooperating on multiple levels, hoping that we together can create a better future for green hydrogen to develop. Sino-European cooperation on hydrogen is the necessary response to climate change and the development needs of both sides. Our hydrogen cooperation can unfold from three aspects. First, extensive technical exchanges, innovation. Second, talent and business exchanges. And third, lead multilateral exchanges. I believe the discussion today will be significant to the future of China-EU cooperation, especially on the policy recommendations for hydrogen development. I wish the workshop a great success and wish all the delegates and guests online and offline health and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, President Chen, for those wonderful and lofty remarks. Through his words, we can also see that China is now working very proactively as a participant, but also a leader in the area of green hydrogen technology revolution. Now, the organization committee is also very honored to be able to invite Mr. Octavian Stamati
Councillor for Climate Action and Energy for the EU delegation to China. Now, the floor is yours, Councillor.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. My name is Octavian Stamate. I am Councillor for Energy and Climate Action in the delegation of the European Union to China. I am delighted to address the event today. I regret not being able to be physically present. On behalf of the EU delegation to China, I would like to extend warm greetings to all participants, including a special salute to distinguished representatives of the Shanghai International Institute of Studies, as well as to our friends from Agora Energy Vendem. I am grateful to them for giving me the opportunity to present this video message. In my opening remarks, I would like to refer to the link between the effort to reach the climate targets and the need to boost innovation and accelerate deployment of key new technologies in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. From the way the whole humanity reacted to the formidable challenge represented by the pandemic, I think we have learned, and sadly we have learned the hard way, a very important lesson. Our very existence depends essentially on the reliability and sustainability of the various systems developed over time to support essential aspects of modern life. When it comes to a disease, this applies primarily to health systems, but there are other vital economic and social systems, including energy production and consumption. Therefore, when planning and acting for the post-pandemic resumption of economic activity, it is of crucial importance to maintain our focus on the perennial overarching challenge, that is, how to advance transition to a new model of development which is greener, cleaner, low carbon, and essentially sustainable. In many parts of the world, pandemic restrictions resulted in economic slowdown, which led to reduction of CO2 emissions. As economic activity picks up again, problems caused by climate change will inevitably gain renewed attention. We know already that we are dealing with catastrophic floods, droughts, storms, freeze, heat waves, and sandstorms. For these kind of disasters, humanity will never reach any level of immunity. To deal with this persistent challenge, even before the outbreak, the European Commission has put forward an ambitious strategy entitled European Green Deal. This strategy will put EU economy and society on a more sustainable development path and turn challenges related to our environment and climate liabilities into opportunity to generate a more balanced and fairer economic growth. Last year, the Climate Target Plan set the stage for the necessary transformation in line with the target enshrined in the EU climate goal. That is to achieve by 2030 a 55% CO2 emissions reductions at the level of the EU as compared with year 1990. Just a couple of months ago, the European Commission came out with a package of legislative proposals known as Fit for 55 to deliver on this ambitious goal in a fair, cost-efficient and competitive way. EU's leadership in the fight against climate change will be constantly reasserted by action and example. We aim to make our recovery not only greener, cleaner and healthier, but also more forward-looking in terms of creativity and deployment of new technologies. Therefore, next generation EU recovery budget will extend substantive financial support to projects in key sectors, from 5G to artificial intelligence, and from offshore renewable energy to clean hydrogen. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU and China are key parties to the Paris Agreement, and they are actively engaged in the global effort to limit adverse effects of the climate change. Both the EU and China have chosen to follow the path towards decarbonization. EU to reach climate neutrality by 2050, and China to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. In order to reach our respective targets, it is essential to develop new low-carbon sources of energy and to enable quick deployment of related innovative technologies. Innovation-driven carbon neutrality will lead to scientific breakthroughs and advanced development of revolutionary technologies, in particular in energy sector. From this standpoint, cooperation between the European Union and China holds a great potential, as recognized by the EU-China Joint Statement on Energy Cooperation, signed in 2019 in the presence of the top European and Chinese leaders. This statement identifies enhanced cooperation of innovative business actors in the EU and China as one of the 4 main work streams for development of joint activities. In order to implement the ambition of the European Green Deal, the European Commission published in July 2020 a strategy that sets out a vision of how to turn clean hydrogen into a viable solution to decarbonize different sectors. The specific objective is to install at least 6 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers in the EU by 2024 and 40 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers by 2030. The strategy identifies the challenges to overcome, lays out the levers that the EU can mobilize, and presents a roadmap of actions for the coming years. This strategic roadmap provides a concrete policy framework within which the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance will develop an investment agenda and a pipeline of concrete projects. The ongoing work streams of EU energy policy, including hydrogen development, will foster a climate-neutral integrated energy system with renewable electricity and low-carbon fuels at its core, a system geared towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the objectives of the Paris Agreement. The international dimension is an integral part of the EU approach. In line with the external dimension of the European Green Deal, hydrogen will take a higher place on the external agenda of EU energy policy, which will include cooperation on trade and research activities, but also mutually beneficial interactions in other areas. It is my sincere hope that the workshop today will help establishing new contacts and incite dialogue between stakeholders in Europe and China, and support their effort to develop innovative solutions for the clean development of hydrogen industry. Additionally, it will constitute a valuable input to deepening and diversifying EU-China relations in general. I would like to conclude by extending my best wishes to the participants in today's event. I wish them great success in their current and future endeavors. Thank you for your attention.
非常感谢傅维恩先生的精彩致辞。正如他刚才提到的，就是欧盟在绿色清洁能源转型领域以及气候变化领域也发挥着全球领导作用。那么有鉴于中国越来越多的也在就是清洁能源转型领域所做出的巨大的投入以及我们的双碳议程我个人也非常期待未来的中欧能源合作的进展。那么我所来自的尔戈尔能源转型论坛未来也非常愿意与有关各方深入合作，那么并继续为中欧国际合作添砖加瓦。下面呢，我想把话筒交给
Now I will hand over to the moderator for the keynote speech, who is the director of the Institute for Comparative Politics and Public Policy from SIIS, Dr. Yu Hongyuan. Please. Thank you, Mr. Tu, for giving me the opportunity to chair this session. We understand how important efficiency, cost, and technical sophistication are. And sometimes there are trade-offs as well. We're very honored that today we will have 4 speakers addressing 4 different perspectives, including industry and banking, the financial sector, international organizations, and academic background, so that we can have a more balanced view when looking at the complicated energy transition topic. We are very honored, first of all, to have the Vice Chairman of the International Association for Hydrogen Energy, Professor Mao Zongqiang from Tsinghua University. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning or good afternoon. Can you hear me well? Loud and clear. Thank you. It's a great honor to be invited to the workshop and share with you my ideas. The organizer asked me to talk about economic performance of the hydrogen economy here in China. So that is going to be the topic today.
Professor
Mao, we can present your slides for you. Which slide are you on? We can do the screen share for you. Okay, thank you. Professor Mao, just let us know when you want us to turn to the next page. Sure, next page. I cannot see any screen share. I will touch upon several things in my presentation today. First, the importance of the hydrogen industry in China. Second, policies, the regulations, and standards and how they impact economic benefits. Third, the technological progress and its economic benefits. The next, scalability and its benefits. Next, international cooperation. And next is just a philosophical ideas about on hydrogen development, and followed by a summary. I can hardly see the font. Well, we know that hydrogen is an important toolkit for carbon neutrality, which is a common topic around the world. Many countries already launched the date and timeline, and for example, 2050 and 2060 for China. And hydrogen is indispensable for achieving these targets. Next slide. I cannot see clearly, I'm afraid. The existing policy framework is not built for sustainable energy. That is why renewables are very costly. Well, right now, we could see that hydrogen is being treated as a hazardous chemical. And even though it in nature is the energy. However, the policy is not really treating it as the energy source, which they contributes to the high cost of it. Next, according to the existing policy, hydrogen plants must be located within industrial parks, and that causes a lot of inconvenience for it to be used as energy. Next, the standard on hydrogen on gas pressure is 20, and which increases the cost because this is too low. And next, the current regulation requires the production and refueling stations to be separate, and the refueling stations must be built on commercial land. These are all affecting the further development of hydrogen energy, and it's all impacting the economic benefits of hydrogen.
President Xi Jinping has delivered a keynote speech via video link at the Leaders Summit of COP15 on biological diversity, and he said that in order to achieve carbon peaking, carbon neutrality targets, China will release implementation plans for peak carbon dioxide emissions in key areas and sectors, as well as a series of supporting measures, and will put in place a 1+N policy framework for carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. And on September 22nd, there has already been a release of a suite of policies to make sure that the opinions from the State Council is known throughout the country in guiding the development of hydrogen industry. And this is a top-down policy guidance and had mentioned hydrogen, coordinated hydrogen energy industry development from a very coordinated level. And this is only a set of preliminary targets. And I mentioned 1+N, and this is only one of those, and there will be more policies to be issued. And thirdly, the technological progress in hydrogen will also promote the development of the industry and reduce the cost. At the moment, we are using renewables to generate electricity and use that to create hydrogen. And so now we are looking at the cost of renewable energy power generation reducing significantly. And this had paved way for the lowering of cost for hydrogen production. If you look at the left-hand diagram, you can see that offshore wind power had dropped in its cost by 29%. And this is only the smallest drop among all types of renewables. And on August 20th, 2020, Zhong Baoshen, the chairman of Longyi Group, had said in an interview that in terms of power generation cost only can be as low as under 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If you can achieve that, then green hydrogen would indeed be very economical. And on April 19th, 2021, we have looked at the price for PV solar power generation be lowered again 1.04 cent, which is less than 7 cent, 7 fin RMB, which will again make it very promising for green hydrogen cost to further reduce. Technological progress increases the production capacity of water electrolyzers equipment and thus reduces the cost of hydrogen production. At the moment, we already have capabilities to produce a domestic 1,000 Newton meters cubic per hour medium pressure water hydrolysis hydrogen production facility, and this will increase the level of economic viability and reduce the cost. Technological progress had also improved the production capacity of individual facilities to reduce the unit prices and making the hydrogen production cost lower. Many other countries have also issued similar rules and regulations and similar good news. For example, Japan has released its domestic fuel cell target plan towards 2040. And this, they have mentioned that the stack power density of Toyota Mirai vehicles had been increased from 3.1 kilowatt per liter to 5.4 kilowatt per liter. The improvement in the performance will further lower its cost. And fourthly, the development of digital technology and smart manufacturing technologies will improve the economic benefits of hydrogen industrial chain. This will bring remarkable economic benefits and also improve the overall efficiency of energy supply and consumption of hydrogen industry chain. And this would also further improve the carbon emission accounting system and enable hydrogen enterprises to be more competitive in both domestic and international market. For example, addressing the carbon border adjustment mechanism recently introduced by the EU. And also the development of digital technology and smart manufacturing technologies will improve the economic benefits of hydrogen industrial chain. And there is hope that by developing green smart manufacturing, we can use it as an important tool for hydrogen development in China. And this will further improve intelligent manufacturing production efficiency through automation and dynamic monitoring and management, and in turn improve the economic benefits of hydrogen industry chain. Economy of scale and localization would also bring benefits. And according to reports, the number of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles produced and sold in China were 1,199. And this was in 2019, and that has increased in 2020. And there are 10 major producers, such as Yutong Group and Zhongtong Bus. And now, currently, there are quotations from companies that had talked about a further reduction in its price, as well as increasing its capacity. For example, we will have a price of 1,199 yuan per kilowatt if the order is at or above 10,000 units. And also, Toyota has been using the same electric components in its hybrid vehicles, and Honda had used the same chassis in its plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. All of these measures can enhance the scale production of hydrogen vehicle parts. Scale and localization could bring other benefits as well. For example, the alkaline electrolyzer technology is now world leading with a single capacity at 1,000 cubic meters hydrogen per hour, and the cost would be around 7,000 yuan. This is basically about half of developed countries. We have also seen a lot of good results coming out of the localization of the production for the batteries. And we now have a local manufacturing capacity for membrane electrodes, proton exchange membranes, and bipolar plates. Gas diffusion layer enterprises have also started small-scale production. And so when we have the largest production scale, the highest localization rate, and intelligent manufacturing, we would have the best economic benefits. If we wanted to make it a viable option, we need to be able to achieve this equation. Fifthly, the international cooperation on hydrogen is essential. At the moment in Scotland, there is COP26 that is happening as we speak, and we talk about climate action, and hydrogen energy would become a hot topic globally. So we could follow the Belt and Road Initiative to promote cooperation in hydrogen technology. We can export equipment and technology, as well as producing green hydrogen and green ammonia, and so on and so forth. This offers us an opportunity which also provides strategic support for the Belt and Road Initiative. And finally, we talk about the ethics of hydrogen. It has been developing for a very long time, and then it needs to be supported by morals and ethics. And there is a variety of moral principles that should be followed in the development of hydrogen. For example, it needs to be nature-based and sustainable in its development. For example, coke oven gases are a good source for blue hydrogen. However, the coking industry should not be developed in order to obtain it. Otherwise, more carbon dioxide will be emitted. Another example, energy diversification should be promoted for energy security purposes. Both hydrogen and electrification should be developed and adopted where suitable. And also, we need to remember the original intention of developing hydrogen, and this shall never be forgotten. We should pay attention to the sustainability instead of sticking to the current economic benefits of hydrogen. And this is something we need to pay special attention to, because this is a huge potential risk for our future generations. And finally, in conclusion, China has begun the great energy journey with the goal of carbon neutrality by 2060 as its destination. The day when China realizes carbon neutrality would mark the day it achieves energy independence, which would also reflect China's important contribution to the development of the human society. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in 2060, it is about time that China replaces coal with green hydrogen and green electricity in a well-planned and orderly manner. And also there needs to be rules and regulations, standards and policies compatible with the green hydrogen industrial chain to help improve its economic benefits. The development of the industry relies on technological progress, including digitalization and intelligent manufacturing. There needs to be enhanced international cooperation and for the benefits to be trickled down to the rest of the world. We need to pay attention to the ethics of the industry because this is very important. These are my humble opinions, and I welcome your comments and criticisms. Well, thank you very much, Professor Mao. President Xi Jinping had talked about the 4 revolutions, including ones on production, on technology, and international cooperation. And Professor Mao's remarks had also been talking about efficiency, cost, technology, and very importantly, international cooperation, speaking on how China will continue to be the leader in this industry and providing public goods to the rest of the world. Thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker comes from Shell. Shell has most recently issued its energy vision and forecast for the world, and we have the honor of inviting Mr. Tobias Chen, the head of Asia Pacific for Shell Hydrogen, to speak to us on the role of green hydrogen. Can you see my screen and hear me? Also my screen. Yes, very clear. Respected leaders, colleagues, good afternoon. Today, because of the snow, my flight has been cancelled. I wouldn't be able to be there in person, but I hope in the future there will be more opportunities for me to speak with you in person. Thank you for the invitation from the organizers. Today, I'd like to share with you some of Shell's thoughts on hydrogen development and its role in corporate energy transition. According to the requirements of our legal department, I need to first show this disclaimer, and this is a warning that the whatever I say today should not become investment advice because there's a lot of uncertainties. Shell is a company where we have been focusing on natural gas and oil. And because of the climate change impact, we have been receiving a lot of attention. And as a supplier, we have been shifting towards cleaner and more low carbon energy sources. For example, we have acquired a company in the UK to achieve a large section of our gas assets, and now we're actually paying equal attention to both oil and gas. We are also venturing into the new energy development, and each year we would invest $1 to $2 billion in new energy. And this is actually our third attempt into this area. And this time we're more steadfast than before, because we believe that the time is ripe and the international community requires companies like us to grow with time. And so at the beginning of last year, we have declared that we are going to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. And this is actually a response to President Xi Jinping's double carbon targets last year. And we have some visions as well, some of the areas we're going to make investment in, some of our thoughts, some of our targets, and how we're going to conduct the transition and achieve profits. It is our firm belief that when the world walks towards a cleaner and low carbon future, Shell will continue to make our contribution. In that process, we have already started some of our actions in low carbon transition. For example, in the future, every year we're going to invest $2 to $3 billion to build our supply chain in renewables, and we're also enhancing our investment. The expectation is by 2030, we're going to be able to provide to 50 million household electricity from renewable sources, and also a triple growth for hydrogen consumption.
Today we'll focus on our energy transition strategy. Now, over 90% of the hydrogen comes from carbon or fossil fuels, which produces a lot of carbon dioxide, which is the gray hydrogen that we say. Exclusively as we are managed to produce blue and green hydrogen through SMR or on having biofuels, and both blue and green hydrogen can replace gray hydrogen to provide fuel to industries, aviation, and to support the power generation industry. Hydrogen has very high energy density. That is why it is good for heavy-duty road transport and other hard-to-abate industries such as shipping, and also steel and cement, which requires a lot of energy input. And for Chinese, carbon neutrality, hydrogen is very important because petrol and gas are 70 and 40% dependent on export, and also environment as well as energy security are all posing challenges for China. For inland China, there is sufficient solar and wind, especially offshore wind, is also very abundant in coastal China. Well, hydrogen can be a very good complement in that landscape, especially for energy storage. And for hydrogen's significance to energy industries, great consensus has already been reached. We see that multinationals are deploying the hydrogen industry chains actively, and so are energy industries such as Shell. So we want to provide one-stop services for customers. If customers have the demand for zero carbon or neutrality and development, we answer with helping them to decarbonize in the sector, on industry, community, or the family that they're located at. But if customers want different things, and so what we do is we make low carbon solutions based on the specific that customers need. And by 2050, all profits of Shell will come from zero carbon energy solutions, so that most consumers can get the low carbon on products and solutions, including hydrogen for aviation and also renewable electricity for households, etc. Speaking of Shell, we know that gas station a network of ours is the largest over actually 44,000, and we provide energy services for consumers around the world. And in China, we have over 700. And apart from LNG, we also provide refueling stations for hydrogen. With our network, we can provide hydrogen to all regions in need. We believe that in the beginning of the hydrogen industry, it's very difficult to make sure profitability can be achieved at every step. If that happens, the cost of the energy will be very high, especially for the end consumers, which makes it unable to compete with traditional fuels. That is why we want to have an integrated approach of developing in hydrogen from offshore wind to on-land solar, PV, and wind, and to the raw material need in the factories, and to the refueling stations that service the commercial the fleets and private cars. We want every part to develop together from end to end so that we can create more value for customers. And on the slide, you see the hydrogen projects of Shell and where they are. Started from 2 decades ago, we started refueling as well as electrolysis pilots in 2007 with Tongji and Shanghai Shenhua. We built the very first fixed hydrogen refueling station in Shanghai. Now our hydrogen assets are across North America, Asia, and Europe, and we have over 100 refueling stations that provide transportation on it and refueling, including in gas and liquid and a pipe, and also 30 to 70 MPa. So basically, on the production, the transportation, and refueling are all covered, and also production of green hydrogen is our ultimate goal. In the short term, and not all global markets have the conditions for producing green hydrogen. In certain places, blue and green have to be produced together. Blue is a temporary solution to accelerate the scalability of green hydrogen. In the meantime, carbon dioxide can be reduced. Our goal is for the scale of the green hydrogen production to move from dozens of megawatts to hundreds of megawatt level. And these small successes will help the entire industry to form clusters, and with the demand on the end side increases and infrastructure becomes more mature, we will have a global network of green hydrogen production in the future. And several projects that I would like to share with you today. First is Rotterdam, a green hydrogen base on the Netherlands last year on a 759 megawatt project was won by these companies together with Crosswind, and it could actually provide energy to more than 1 million households. And also we want to have a green hydrogen plant in the port of Rotterdam, and the rest and the hydrogen is initially used for a furnace refinery, and the leftover, the remaining will be used for the energy demand of residential communities. And this is Nord H2, which is one of the largest green hydrogen projects in Europe. It is located in North Netherlands, and we would like the green hydrogen production to reach around 1 million tons by 2040, and it will go on grid in 2030. And for these two projects, they both use offshore wind for electrolysis, which is also a new area that receives a lot of attention in China, even though wind power offline in China is still very high, but there is potential for cost reduction. And for Yangtze Delta, Zhu Delta, Pearl River Delta, well, And the green hydrogen demand is very high, and there is a gap for energy supply. So I believe that we will see major breakthroughs in China very soon. This project is located in Rhineland refinery in Germany, and we see this is a 10 megawatt PEM electrolyzer, which produces around 10 tons of green hydrogen per year. And when the wind solar has surplus, it can actually help with the peak on shaving of the local grid, and that also helps with the spot market of the power in that area, thus creating extra income stream for the project owner. And this is the first commercial project of a similar nature in China. Will last November. The project was announced that, and so it could produce 9 tons of hydrogen, 64 tons of oxygen on a daily basis. Our goal is before the end of 2021, the project that can be up and running, and so that it can make contributions to the Winter Olympics in 2022, as well as the hydrogen industry in Zhangjiakou City. And for a road transport, together with the G Daimler and Iveco, we launched a consortium which is aimed for large-scale hydrogen fuel trucks, and by 2025 we want to have 100 heavy-duty trucks and over 20 stations, and so that we can have more than 1,000 hydrogen fuel heavy-duty trucks, and that can cover all the refueling stations in Europe. And as Professor Mao said, and the transportation of hydrogen is another bottleneck we face. Shell is one of the major traders of the ONG, and we have extensive experience on the transportation. We know that it has to be kept under 253 degrees Celsius in the transportation, and if these bottlenecks can be resolved, it can be one of the most traded commodities in the world, and for a lot of countries that have poor on energy resources, they could use electrolysis to supply the energy, and this helps with carbon neutrality in the world. And in Japan, right now, there is the Hydro project, which is in partnership with Kawasaki Heavy Industries, as well as the Iwatani. And this is the very first on hydrogen frontier. So liquefied hydrogen was shipped from Japan to Australia, and it took 76 days before the transportation to finish. And last December, we launched on Jaharia, which is the company that develops hydrogen powered aircrafts, and by 2030 they want to have aircrafts that can carry 200 passengers and fly 3,000 kilometers. And all in all, the industry sees very strong momentum. The government also provides great support and capital, and investors are also looking at the hydrogen industry, but we're still at the fledgling stage. There are fundamental problems which require collaboration of government and private sector. There are several policy-related issues. Professor Mao already touched upon them, including hydrogen being treated as a hazardous chemical, and they have to be located in industrial parks, and refueling stations must use commercial land. For green hydrogen to replace gray hydrogen and to accelerate energy transition based on green hydrogen, we need to emphasize the zero carbon nature of hydrogen, which is still very difficult in the carbon trade market, because now carbon is around 50 RMB per ton. but in Europe it's 65 euros a ton. So we see a big gap also. As carbon becomes more expensive, the livelihood of businesses also will be affected, and hence causing ripple factor to the livelihood of the people. So we need a balance, and this is one of the issues that the government and private sector need to collaboratively resolve, but it's only a matter of time before we get a solution. And we hope that the Shell can make a contribution to the future development of hydrogen. And we would like to share our experiences of operating hydrogen and other energy sources abroad to China, so that we can build a great system of green and hydrogen. And we hope the vision of a beautiful China can be achieved very soon. Thank you very much. That is all from me. And thank you, Mr. Chen, for the wonderful presentation. Hydrogen shall requires not only technical advancement, and also we see a bright future ahead in terms of the market. And in this process, we see the private sector, government, cities, and are collaborating. We also see cooperation of all stakeholders, which is what a technical revolution really needs. Our next speaker has been responsible for energy and environment in Asia Development Bank for many years, and he's also a senior advisor right now at Tencent. So without further ado, Dr. Zhai Yongping. Thank you, moderator. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. I am quite humbled. The previous two experts are definitely the experts, very big names in industry. I'm actually just here to learn.
So I've been thinking about from which angle should I be joining the discussion as a non-expert in the hydrogen sphere? How could I be adding value to today's discussion? And so considering my double capacity, in the first half year, I was still at the ADB looking at energy-related investment. And after July, I have joined Tencent in its carbon neutrality strategy development. And so I do have a double role. So perhaps I think I should be speaking from these two capacities and share with you some of my learnings over the past years. And before I start, I would like to say a few things. I am here to learn, as I mentioned, as someone who is a non-expert. We have questions and we have our own superficial understandings of the topic. And as someone who's worked in energy-related investment for a long time, how do we see the financing of these projects? As part of a high-tech company nowadays, we also like to think how we can use new technologies to promote the development of green hydrogen. And finally, some of my recommendations to share with you. So, as I was looking at hydrogen and I wanted to learn about it, I've seen two photos, and the two photos came from the founder of Bloomberg. So I've borrowed from his slides, and these are some of the things I would like to share with you. Hydrogen is a very interesting medium in the energy world. It has many uses. It's an energy that can be stored, converted, transported, and free of carbon emission. So you can see that it's very versatile. You can use it in transportation, and you can use it to supply energy. You can cook with it. You can mix it with natural gas. And even you can use it to generate power. So we can, of course, we use electricity to produce hydrogen, but with the hydrogen produced, we can generate power. So it is highly versatile. And you can call it, we can see it as a very useful tool, such as Swiss Army knife. But also, you will see that only when there is no alternative at all, and hydrogen was the only option. Those were the cases where hydrogen is used and cannot be replaced. But in all the other areas I've mentioned, in the heating, in transportation, in cooking, in power generation, all of these sectors would have alternative plans other than hydrogen. And as an investor in energy, we would not pick hydrogen easily. So should we be making investment now to green energy, green hydrogen, or even hydrogen projects? A few weeks ago, I was reading an expert opinion from Siemens. The senior executive talked about that green hydrogen is not yet commercially competitive. And he said that for hydrogen to become competitive with the other alternative options, there are still many things that needs to be done before that can be achieved. So as a project financier, I have worked in this area for more than 30 years. And as a financier, as we look at a project, there is a very simple financial logic. If the project has high risks, the problem is not big because we would be expecting high returns. So high risk levels is not a problem. If a project has low return, that's not a problem at all. We also have financial instruments where we can make adjustments such as interest rates for loans. But if a project has high risk levels and uncertain returns, for projects like that, we do not have existing financial tools to support the making of such decisions. And so for these projects, we don't have ready-to-use tools. So when we talk about hydrogen project investment, and as we speak about green hydrogen as an investor, we are facing a lot of uncertainties going forward. What we need as a banker, what we need is a PPA. And for any project financing, there needs to be a committed distribution contract, and that is the only thing. Something that is long-term, fixed price, offtake contract. That is the basis for any possible investment. If we look at green hydrogen, compare that to solar PV, that's about same situation for solar PV 10 to 15 years earlier. So you can try and remember what happened to solar PV. At that time, the government is supporting the market with an on-the-grid tariff for solar PV power generation. And so this is quite possibly the same path hydrogen energy will have to take, which means it would require government support. At that time, solar PV had a feed-in tariff that is fixed. Now for hydrogen, we must wait and see what the government policies will be to support it. Is it going to be supported in the R&D phase, in the upper and middle stream of the industry chain, or the lower stream? And in the longer term, carbon price would be the decisive factor for hydrogen prices. At the moment, for example, there is a lot of differences in the production cost for different methods. And we have heard that currently the carbon price is 50 yuan per ton, and in Europe it's 60 euro euros per ton, the difference is still very, very big. So at the moment, we cannot really use carbon prices to support the financing of green hydrogen projects. We need government support instead. For example, the Chilean government had invited bids to build green hydrogen facilities with a subsidy of 50 million US dollars. And the government has a target of 5 gigawatt of green hydrogen production capacity by 2030. This makes it the most competitive green hydrogen production and export base in the world. The tendering process had started in April this year. Many companies have expressed interest. Many of the well-known names in the industry have participated. The government wants to build a 10 megawatt pilot program, but all of these companies had offered a project size of 20 megawatt. So if there is government subsidy, companies will be incentivized to join the program. If the companies go and join it, then banks and investors could join following them. I won't go into details in these case studies. Around the world, many countries, there are 26 green hydrogen development projects at gigawatt level. The total capacity would be 260 gigawatt, and every week we have new projects, reports on new projects. The largest project to date is High Deal Ambition in Europe. I won't go into details here. This is a Europe-based project, very large-scale pilot program, very ambitious indeed. And then we talk about digital technologies. Will digital technologies be able to support the development of hydrogen energy? Professor Mao, in his presentation, had talked about how digital progress will help to enhance the development of hydrogen. For any project, really, any infrastructure and energy project, we can use digital technologies and create models on different scenarios. And in hydrogen, we can look at the demand fluctuations, weather, as well as local infrastructures. For the future, that could be energy consumption, the performance and productivity of factories, the purity and storage, and other key factors in hydrogen production. And also in the application, we can work on green hydrogen origin. The blockchain-based platform can be used to collect the power generation data from renewable energy plants and verify the share of hydrogen injected into electrolyzers and the amount of hydrogen generated in the process. If we have blockchain technologies, we'll be able to share reliable, transparent, and non-editable data across the whole platform. There are also other cases where there has been a high AI project in the UK. This project is a joint program between the EMEC and the Imperial College London. And they have built together a high AI project and created an asset management software. Combining that with AI prediction algorithms to try and predict demand and cost into the future and create decision making in the real time based on intelligent information and driven by data. This is the case in the UK. We can then look at a blockchain green hydrogen traceability platform in Spain. This is, we heard, the first ever blockchain platform that can ensure the renewable sources of green hydrogen so that customers can verify and have a visual of the entire value chain for green hydrogen in any place in the world. And you can calculate the amount of carbon dioxide emission that had been avoided by using green hydrogen. So we can see in these real cases, there are already good applications in other places of the world, especially this final one in Spain. So some of my personal thoughts, like I said, currently, green hydrogen still needs government support to receive financing, and this also is dependent on the increasing of carbon price. And there needs to be digital technologies applied to this industry to ensure that the origin of renewable origin can be traced. And my thought for you to take away is whether or not we can create a whole industry chain green financing platform, green hydrogen platform, and this can attract investment. Resolving the financing difficulty for these projects, we need to use digital technologies to build this whole industry chain green hydrogen platform, supply and demand side both. And we should be able to obtain data on supply and demand, also create price indexes and industry indices. From green hydrogen to hydrogen energy, how much carbon emission had exactly been reduced? We need to make sure that we know that exact number. And we also can create a linkage between this platform to the carbon exchange to use technologies to ensure the origin, the renewable origin of green hydrogen. We can also link to the financial institutions to make sure there's financing coming into the different links of the industry. These are not my personal own thoughts. These are actually a consensus among other people in this industry. Some of them work in the upper stream, some in the middle stream, some in the lower stream. But they have all thought that if we have this platform, we should be able to guarantee the traceability of green hydrogen and to ensure our capability in calculating the exact carbon emission reduction and make it easier for us to connect with financial institutions. On the other hand, we can also link with the carbon exchange or the carbon market. This whole industry chain platform needs the contribution of all stakeholders, and we hope more organizations and institutions can join in building this green platform. I believe I can give a few final comments on what I am working on now.
As I said earlier, as a tech company, a Tencent can play a due part on carbon neutrality, but what part can it play? I think that exceeds the topic of green hydrogen itself. Let's see, Tencent and its contribution to green hydrogen as a tech company. First off, that Tencent is just like any other company in China after September 22nd, when the two carbon goals were announced. Tencent, alongside other Chinese companies, immediately started to work on explorations in this regard. First, to understand its own carbon footprints for any company. To achieve carbon neutrality, there are 3 to 4 important steps. The first one being understanding its own baseline. Second, to build a carbon neutrality strategy, and third, a roadmap and time schedule to achieve neutrality. Fourth, the implementation of the roadmap and timeline and verification of the results. These steps are also what Tencent is doing. The first step has already been completed. We've already taken the stock of our own carbon emissions. The one concept here is our carbon emissions is around mid-sized coal-fired plants for a whole year. And after having that baseline, we looked at what we could do to neutralize the carbon emissions. There are 3 ways. First, we participate in the green power trade. China has reformed the electricity market, which helps a lot of the companies to have a way to purchase green electricity. Second, Tencent is investing in renewable projects directly, so that we are the owner the renewable generation projects, and that is also a way for us to achieve neutrality. And for the remaining emissions that are not balanced, we can resort to other vehicles, including green certificates. Tencent can also, in the future, invest in negative emissions technologies so that we can truly contribute to carbon neutrality. But what is more challenging and more important in the future is how Tencent as a tech company can support other industries and sectors to achieve neutrality. We've been discussing green hydrogen, which is involved in the development of technologies, for example, traceability and digital twins and digital platforms, etc. So there are a lot of details that Tencent as a tech company can get involved. So Tencent can participate in the roadmaps of other companies. We just discussed the carbon footprint and green hydrogen, as well as our own plans to reduce carbon emissions and also verification. Well, we can replicate similar steps for other or together with other companies, and we have platforms and toolkits that can be used to support stakeholders in other industries and sectors, and I think that brings more potential. Well, as a tech company, we really hope in the future we could find opportunities to work together, including government authorities, institutions, so that together we can join hands in contributing to a neutrality future. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. So Professor Mao's perspective is more academic, and he shared with us the economic benefits of hydrogen and energy, and I believe on market and infrastructure and theoretical breakthroughs, academic achievements are all needed for technology to be translated into reality. All these that can help with the scaling up in the market and in infrastructure. We need technology and economy to work hand in hand. Our next speaker is with our organizer on Agora, and he's the program lead hydrogen for Agora, and he will share his presentation online. And please, Dr. Matthias Deutsch.
Floor is yours, Deutsch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think you should by now see my presentation. If that's not the case, please let me know. I can see it. Yes, you can see some mushrooms. Then it's good. So I'm going to talk about the status quo of green hydrogen in Europe and implications for China, but I will have a special focus on infrastructure because I think that is an interesting development that's going on in Europe. And so I'll present some parts of a study that we delivered earlier this year. When I say we, let me first introduce our organization, Agora Energiewende. Agora, we are a think tank and policy lab. We are around 100 energy transition experts. We are independent and non-partisan because we have a diverse financing structure. And our vision is to have a prosperous and climate neutral global economy by 2050. And to reach that goal, we give policy advice to deliver clean power, heat, and industry in Germany, Europe, and around the globe. And so we have a headquarters in Berlin, but we also have offices in Brussels, Beijing, and Bangkok. And to dive deeper into the topic of hydrogen infrastructure, let me first show you the current state of discussion in Europe, which is to a large extent driven by the gas transmission system operators and their own thinking. And so I'm going to present to you what has been put forward as is called the European Hydrogen Backbone 2040. So the gas TSOs who today run the natural gas pipelines and the system propose as a long-term vision to have on the one hand hydrogen pipelines that you can see in green, which are converted from existing natural gas pipelines, and then what you can see in yellow to add newly constructed hydrogen pipelines. And both together form what they think as a European hydrogen backbone 2040. Now, keep in mind that TSOs have an interest in keeping their role as TSOs and probably expanding infrastructure. That's what they are good at. That's what they've been doing for most of the time. And so we asked ourselves, how do we see this? What's our analysis on what we need for hydrogen infrastructure? Because there is a risk that we overbuild, that we just have the people in charge who are good at expanding. And so we took a deeper look at the demand side of hydrogen first. What is needed? What is absolutely needed? And this connects to some of the presentations before. So we have our own matrix of what is needed. And so we conclude there is a limited set of no regret applications in all sectors that need renewable hydrogen to become climate neutral. And if you look at this matrix, you see the sectors in the first line: industry, transport, power sector, buildings. And then we have this kind of a traffic light system of what we call no regret, controversial, and bad idea. When we say no regret, it's because hydrogen is needed for some very specific chemical properties, for its energy density, or for the storability. And here we're going to focus on industry in particular. If you look at the yellow line where it's controversial, it's because hydrogen actually faces competition with direct electrification and renewables. And then where we think it's a really bad idea, hydrogen has so much losses in energy conversion, so it's so energy inefficient, then hydrogen is a bad idea for those applications. That's kind of our way of thinking about this, and this connects to what you've seen before in another presentation. Now, with this in mind, we look at industry in particular. And industry has some important uses, and there are no alternatives really. And so in the study that we commissioned and AFRI did for us, you can see that there are certain molecules, certain applications such as ammonia, methanol, or iron, ore reduction, petrochemicals, plastics recycling that really need renewable hydrogen. And this is on the diagram, it's in terawatt hours per year, and it's from 2020 to 2050. So you get an idea that in this modeling exercise, it stays roughly at around 300 terawatt hours in the future if, and that's an important assumption, if you assume that refineries' demand for hydrogen is phased out. That's in pink is refineries, and refineries are phased out. Instead, you see steel making coming in as the major need for hydrogen in the future. Now, what does this tell us about Europe if we think about the space and the spatial distribution? Well, steel, ammonia, and refiners and chemical plants are widely distributed across Europe. And you see here hydrogen demand in terawatt hours per year. This is a projection for 2050. And you see different shades of blue in the diagram, in the map. So that shows you at some places there's really high demand, at others it's not. And it differs by orders of magnitude. So it's sometimes smaller than 1 terawatt hour, sometimes around 10 to 30 terawatt hours per year. So we have high demand for hydrogen in certain clusters: Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, where there's large chemical installations and steel plants. Then you can see some clusters in Eastern Europe and along the Mediterranean. And again, this is for 2050. So there is a certain transition implied here, but you can get the idea that it's pretty much spread out. So those no regret industrial hydrogen applications are the demand side of what we see as the core demand of hydrogen that's really needed in Europe in the industry sector. And then there's a supply side to it. On the supply side, we've looked at renewables in particular, and Europe and neighboring countries have a high renewable energy potential. And that's needed for both, for direct electric applications and renewable hydrogen production. So in the map, you see a bit, the sun is better, of course, in the south and wind in the north, but there are also places where you can have both. So in parts of Northern Africa and the MENA region, you have very good hybrid solar and wind resource potential. And in the analysis that we did for hydrogen infrastructure, we looked at two scenarios in this study with AFRI. One is called blue-green, where we have renewable hydrogen production and also hydrogen from fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture. It's called here SMR-CCS. This is only assumed for some countries where the discussion is really there, like in the Netherlands, Norway, or the UK. And then there's a certain second scenario, which is called fast green. There's no SMR CCS assumed, and instead there's a very aggressive cost reduction in electrolyzer cost, pretty much in line with the targets set by the European hydrogen strategy. So this is what we assumed. And then we had a kind of competition in the modeling. We looked at the least cost, the levelized cost of hydrogen, to see where there's cheaper to produce hydrogen. And I will show you the results on two maps, one for the blue-green scenario and one for the fast-green scenario, to show which form of hydrogen production has the lowest levelized cost of hydrogen. And if you look at the left-hand side is the blue-green scenario, where you can see you have in the lower part, you see the legend with the colors. So in green, it's hybrid. That means wind and solar mix. And then the lavender color is SMR CCS. And then you have solar and wind in yellow and blue. And so it's pretty much reflecting what you saw before. Very nice solar resources in the south. In the middle, in the left-hand side diagram, it's a mix of solar and wind. And in the north, it's mainly wind. And in the blue-green scenario, as this is also an assumption, it's possible to produce with fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture and storage. And therefore, in certain places, Netherlands, UK, Norway, you see where by 2030, and this refers to 2030, carbon capture with storage is competitive, is more competitive than a renewable option. However, in the right-hand panel, the fast green scenario, you see that yellow is really the dominant figure. If you have fast cost reductions in electrolyzer cost, solar hydrogen can take a much larger chunk of the map, even becoming better than the green hybrid solution for hydrogen production. And so this is pretty much a strategic outlook where this may be heading. And we conclude from this that the investment window for fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture remains open, but in the long run, renewable hydrogen will emerge as the most competitive option in Europe. And it's important to realize that this will not come by itself. Renewable hydrogen, as we heard before, is not commercially viable today. It needs policy support. So in order to have such a scenario which major renewable hydrogen contribution to be realized, we need ambitious policies. Otherwise, this will not come by itself. And this is the outlook in terms of supply of hydrogen. And after I showed you the demand side with industrial no-regret hydrogen demand and this supply side on a European map, the question was, what could infrastructure look like? Because that's really kind of the missing link between demand and supply, industrial demand clusters and best places to produce hydrogen. And Avery, our consultant, looked at this and did some kind of optimization, deriving least cost infrastructure throughout Europe. And there are many pipeline routes that have been developed from this. But then we asked about no regret corridors, no regret pipelines, to ask where could we start? What should be our main focus to begin in the 2030 time horizon? Because you can derive pretty much everything for 20, 40, 50, or 60. The question is where to start. What are the best investment opportunities today, and what should we look at? And I will now compare this answer from our consultant based on industrial hydrogen demand with the discussion of the European hydrogen backbone. So the question is where to start with the infrastructure investment. On the left-hand side, again, you see the European hydrogen backbone discussion from the gas TSOs for 2030. And again, in green, you see repurposed pipelines, natural gas pipelines. And again, in yellow, you see new constructed hydrogen pipelines. Now, to the right-hand side, you see our result. You see both the best renewable hydrogen potential or the best renewable hydrogen cost for 2050. So it's the long-run cost outlook, solar in the south, here hybrid in the middle, and wind in the north. And then you see in pink the industrial hydrogen demand, 2050, in terawatt hours per year. And as I said, you see those large industrial clusters in the Northwest, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, France, that really need a lot of hydrogen. This has a lot to do, of course, with chemical plants and green steel making in the future. But also you see some other clusters in Spain, in Eastern Europe, in the north, and then Southeastern Europe, where the model from our consultant AFRI derived those no-regret corridors that we should focus on. So I think this is our contribution to the discussion, rather than being a bit confused with something like we need hydrogen everywhere and for everything in the future. Rather focus on what we really can agree on easily, because hydrogen in industry is this no-regret application that nobody doubts, and there's no controversy around that. And that would be the contribution from our side. And let me add to this in the conclusion with some reflections on current European discussions, to compare that maybe to the China discussion also. So in our study, we conclude we have those hard to abate industrial applications, and that's really where renewable hydrogen needs to go, because they don't have another option to decarbonize. And there is an investment window for fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture, but in the long run, renewable hydrogen will emerge as the most competitive option across Europe. And we have, as I just showed you, identified those robust, no-regret corridors for early hydrogen pipelines based on industrial demand. And this is my conclusion. And so for the European discussion to be a bit broader than this, because I really elaborated on infrastructure, the EU is discussing strategies. Member states have published their own strategies. There's a strategy by the European Commission, and we have an ambitious electrolyzer target. We want to deploy in total 40 gigawatts of electrolysis in the EU overall by 2030. So, and there's a clear understanding that the long run objective really is renewable green hydrogen, no doubt about that. There's a bit more discussion, as I showed you before, on the role of fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture. I think the important point is that the European Commission has proposed sectoral targets for renewable hydrogen in industry and transport for 2030. This is a proposal that's currently under discussion and negotiation. Another point that is related to what we heard before in another presentation is the definition of renewable hydrogen really matters. This is currently being developed in Europe. This is important, for example, for the concept of additionality of the renewable electricity that you need to run the electrolyzers. That's an important, very important discussion right now in Europe. And also what's coming up in December of this year is a definition of low carbon hydrogen. That's another legislative package coming from the European Commission. And maybe another reflection more generally on what Europe is already doing, because I just told you about what's coming up. What's already going on is an understanding of this infrastructure aspect. So the EU is promoting what's called important projects of common European interest. The abbreviation is IPCEI or IPCEI. Those IPCEI projects cover the entire value chain. So this is really about not just production and demand, but including this idea of pipelines, of transport, of a trans-European aspect. And there are many projects in Germany, but all across Europe that have started, that have applied for additional policy support and funding for bringing forward this idea of we need hydrogen for important applications. And what I also heard before is this idea that carbon pricing will have a role to play. And I fully agree. In the long run, carbon pricing is seen as the flagship instrument for decarbonization in Europe. We have a carbon price in the European emissions trading system, ETS, but this price is not sufficient for incentivizing renewable hydrogen and not for incentivizing the industrial transformation to green hydrogen. Because bear in mind that for something like green steel making, like DRI steel making, it's not just about the cost of hydrogen, but also about implementing a whole new production technology. So given that the carbon price is not high enough to incentivize all this and will not be high enough in the next years, there's an idea of bridging this cost gap with so-called carbon contracts for difference, CCFD. It's a very specific policy support instrument, a lot of discussion, in particular in Germany on this, to speed up industrial transformation. This is also being picked up at the EU level. It's already been mentioned in the European hydrogen strategy. So carbon contract for difference to bridge this cost gap to the ETS price is an important discussion. And I think this has a lot to do with keeping Europe's industry competitive. We see this global race to climate neutrality. We see the announcements at the COP in Glasgow these days. There is at least a clear understanding what the objective is of climate neutrality. And we will need to deliver climate neutral products. And with this in mind, I think it's a good idea to promote a dialogue and a further cooperation between China and Europe on exactly those issues. As we heard before, the question of how do we define green hydrogen? How do we measure the carbon intensity of certain products? This all contributes to the shared goal of promoting climate neutral countries, climate neutral planet in the end, and of course, climate neutral products that are needed to get to that goal. And with that, thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Dr. 多一奇。Thanks so much. 非常感谢多一奇博士的精彩发言。
Thank you very much, Dr. Doichi, for the wonderful remarks. You have been able to speak on several of the key links in the European development, looking at the critical links in the industry chain, see how Europe could lean on its advantages and also provide better or a bigger room for hydrogen technology to play a role in the development of the socio and economic environment in Europe. We are now going to go into a tea break. I invite everyone on site to go to the front of the room for a group photo. Thank you.
欢迎大家回到正在直播的中欧绿色氢能。
Welcome back to the Europe-China workshop on green hydrogen economy, which is now being live streamed. We will start the panel discussion right now. We're very, first of all, honored to have Ms. Zhang Jin from China EV 100. So Ms. Zhang Jin will start with a presentation, which will kick off the panel discussion. So please, Ms. Zhang. Well, good afternoon or good morning. I would like to thank Agar for the invitation. It's a great honor to share my slides today. Well, we just heard about, the macro industry and finance and international perspectives in terms of the potential of green hydrogen.
那我接下来呢，从中观的层面。
Next, I will focus on the regional level. Let's look at how a green hydrogen can have a path for implementation. It's just my core research on ideas that I would like to share with you and hope to hear your feedback afterwards. So 3 parts, and the first is that I chose Shandong province, and I will tell you later why Shandong is chosen as an example. So with Shandong, let's look at the current status of green hydrogen, and the second is the scalable application of a green hydrogen during the 14th five-year plan. And third, we think on the long-term application of green hydrogen will expand. And speaking of Shandong, a northern province in China, the industrial foundation covering all 41 categories is very solid, but similar to other northern provinces, it is under great pressure of the carbon peaking and neutrality because it features heavy industries and energy consumption is very high. So carbon is very intensive in the province. That is why the low carbon energy transition is very important, and that is why hydrogen is badly in need. As of last year, China has built 118 hydrogen refueling stations and 14 were in Shandong, which ranks the second among all provinces in China. So for the industrial byproduct, the hydrogen, which is the main source of supply in Shandong, well, now for those companies that have potential supply capacity of hydrogen as fuel in Shandong province, it is already 460,000 tons a year, and industrial byproduct hydrogen accounts for 93%, and most of them are actually on two-thirds are actually from coke oven gas, and 50%. And the others could come from propane, dehydrogenation, and other sources. And so we see actually, and the cost of storage and transportation, and plus the operating cost of the refilling stations, and together mean at the end consumption, the cost is about 45 RMB, and there is always a 10 to 15 RMB of subsidy. So per kilo of hydrogen cost is around 35 at the end market, and gradually the economic benefits will be more and more apparent with the scalability. The cost is probably will go down to 30 RMB per kilo. Many do not know that Shandong is also abundant in renewable resources. Photovoltaics installed capacity from last year to the first half of 2021 already ranks the first. Wind, and it was already the fifth in China. And with the two carbon goals, green hydrogen is the ultimate strategic choice for the province. However, now it does not prove yet economically viable. Installed capacity of renewables in the province is very high. As of last year, we see that it was already 1/3 of the total generation capacity, and solar and wind respectively accounted for 14.3 and 11.3%. But for the generation cost of renewables is around more than 30 cents per kilowatt hour. With that cost, the grain hydrogen produced is about 50 RMB per kilo. So it's not that economically viable, and policy-wise for in-station production, as Professor Mao said, we don't have policy breakthroughs because they are still only restricted in the chemical industrial parks, and that is why the existing policy framework is not really helping with the economic benefits that hydrogen can produce. But in the long run, during the 14th Five-Year Plan or FYP period, the scale of the green hydrogen will increase, in particular in transportation. And why transportation? That is because transportation it corresponds to petroleum and diesel. And from the perspective of energy consumption, the potential cost reduction is high. For installed capacity of renewables, which is increasing, we think the cost of renewables for power generation will continue to drop. And based on the 14th FYP plan for renewables by 2025, the installed capacity of renewables will be over 80 million kilowatt, which will be 1.7 times that of 2020. So the cost of renewable production for a generation will continue to decrease. And by 2025, if the cost of renewables could be less than 20 cents per kilowatt hour, the corresponding cost of electrolysis will be lower than 18 yuan per kilo. And that, compared to industrial byproduct hydrogen, will start to have economic advantages. And when electrolysis is less than 18 yuan per kilo, and the price at the end users will be around 35 kilos with the subsidies. And then the green hydrogen during the 14th FYP period will start to have more and apparent economic benefits in the transportation sector. In the long run, and by long, I'm talking about 2035 as a milestone, we think green the hydrogen will increase its application in industrial sectors. The background of the analysis is that China, for 2060, renewables will increase its share in the consumption, and as technology and industrialization increase, the electrolysis equipment cost will also drop. And after the stability of green hydrogen is achieved from production to distribution and sales, the whole industry chain will be less costly. What about the time schedule? So when can green hydrogen start to be important to the deep decarbonization in industries? I think that will be 2013, because let's take the steel, for example. Take hydrogen steel making an example. Hydrogen is used as a fuel. And so we need to look at coal and also the gasified coal, which is the green hydrogen. And so these need to be compared, and gray hydrogen is around 10 RMB per ton per kilo, and when green the hydrogen is around 15 RMB per kilo. And the calculated cost of the pig iron will be around 3,180 per ton. The steel is 4,180 per ton, which is 1.35 times that of blast furnace steel today. And that means pilots in a lot of places already. And as Mr. Jai says, the carbon tax is also relevant. Carbon tax is going up, and we estimate when carbon is around 250 yuan per kilo, and after that cost is subtracted, the green hydrogen will be around 10 to 11 yuan per kilo, and that means it can compete with gray hydrogen in mass applications. That is our prediction. Sometimes industry develops faster than what we estimate, but there could also be uncertainty. We really look forward to further work with all of you, and with a dedication. We really hope that the hydrogen industry in China can serve as a global benchmark for carbon neutrality. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Wang, Isadora, for the great presentation. As Ms. Wang said, we need a joint effort from all links along the industry chain, and we really hope the entire industry chain itself can be broken down to different segments in the panel discussion, so we can take a closer look at all components of the industry chain. And today we have not just the panelists, but also experts from the industry. We'll also invite them to share with us their thoughts and comments at the same time. Really hope the keynote speakers can weigh in when they deem necessary and fitting. And we would now first invite panelists for this session to use 1 minute to introduce themselves. The first is for Kim, and so Kim is with Dana. So Ms. Kim Malin, so policy. And what is the policy's role in the energy transition to green hydrogen? Please, Ms. Kim Lacage.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, thank you to the organizers for this really important and insightful event. Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm from the German Energy Agency. We are together with GIZ and Agora are working in the Chinese-German energy partnership and supporting the German government in these projects. After all, the German Energy Agency, DENA, calls themselves the agency for the applied energy transition. So we are really developing solutions and putting them into practice nationally and internationally, especially in these energy dialogues and energy partnerships that Germany has with different countries. And one example is China. So I'm myself an expert on international market development in hydrogen. So that's why I'm here today. And thank you again, Isadora, for this important questions, because I think especially policies and standardization are really, really important when we are thinking about the hydrogen economy in a whole concept. So the rapid technology learnings that we've seen in the last years and that we will see in the next years, especially in the electrolyzers, but also all the application stuff, the infrastructure things, will bring the cost competitiveness into the market nevertheless, I guess. But in some applications, we talked about some of them today already, these no regrets application fields, the steel making, we will need some policies to really make it cost competitive and to really create a market. But I think this question has two parts, and the one is the time frame, because the next years we will have a market creation. Afterwards, it's going to be a growth, and for 10 years we will see massive project developments, and after that we will have the maturity of the market. And for all these three phases, we will need different policy tools, and it kind of depends on the country how much you want to support these different steps of the development. But on the other hand side, it's the different steps of the value chain, because when we are talking about just as the supply and the demand, it's just two ends of a whole scale. So as the previous speaker, Matthias Deutsch from Agora, said, it's also a lot about infrastructure. So one focus topic might be also the infrastructure thing, and that's going to be a real policy-driven thing, because all these infrastructure, the transmission networks and storage systems are really big and need to be kind of controlled, or kind of the government has to have an eye on it, who is developing these things, because it's not a normal market, because it doesn't make sense to have two transmission lines next to each other. But what it's more about, a global thing, is the standardization, because all these application, all these infrastructure needs to have technical standards that might need to be harmonized globally. But even more important, now I'm talking for the in the German perspective, we plan to import a lot of these products. We plan to import hydrogen, but also derivatives, so ammonia. And to import these, we need to make sure that all of them have the same properties when they are coming to Germany. So we need to have a global view on these standardization of properties of the real products. So when we are talking about green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, what's the difference? And in really detailed technical information, what does it mean? And even when I say, okay, right now we are starting and it's just a creation and the maturity might take 20 years, I guess we need to talk about these things today already. And I would really like to know, what do you think is for China? Because I'm pretty sure it's going to be a different view, because you don't plan to import that much, and it's more about a domestic question. Thank you.
好的，谢谢 Kim 的回答。
Thank you very much, Kim, for the answers. Kim also gave us a question, just like she said. In Europe and in Germany, in terms of policy tools, they are going to take it from a near-term, mid-term to long-term phases. And in terms of standardization, this is very important, especially in international cooperation. If Europe wants to import products and China in different regions, like in the Northeast and in Shandong, if we wanted to export, the standardization is also very important. Kim is interested in hearing what the China side has as thoughts on this topic. We would like to give the floor to Mr. Liu Qiang. Dr. Liu Qiang is a director of Energy Division of Institution of Quantitative and Technical Economics, China Academy of Social Sciences. Please. Mr. Liu is Dr. Liu is also joining us online. Thank you, Dora, and thank you, Agora, for hosting this very interesting event. My name is Liu Qiang. I come from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and I am the head of the Energy Division of the Institute of Quantitative and Technical Economics. Thank you very much, Isidora, as well as the Shanghai team of colleagues for hosting this event. Recently, we have also invited representatives from Agora to come and speak at our events. We have also met with Ms. Zhang Zhen, who spoke before Kim, on her field visits in Shandong. Should I continue with my presentation? You can go straight into your presentation. Okay, very well. The hydrogen energy issue is indeed very interesting, and like many other types of emerging industries, there is a question, the chicken and egg question. So it's an emerging new industry, and among all of these new industries, the most important thing is in two sides. From the supply side, the costs need to be continuously lowered to make sure that it can be commercialized and can be scaled up. And on the other end, we also need to create a market for it. If there is no market, there's not going to be room for it to develop into the future. So these are mutually promotional. And in that process, looking at past experience, especially thinking about our experiences in wind and solar PV, there are many things we can learn from the past. For example, with endless policy promotion, policy measures, on the one hand, we can provide conducive environment for the development and growth of the industry, create a certain market space for it. And there needs to be buyers for it to grow and develop. And also, for the producers in the industry, there needs to be enough incentive, such as financial subsidies and other measures to make sure that they can continue their innovation under a circumstance where there's still no commercial viability. And so it's a very typical economics question in the development of new industries, the conditional creation of a market. In China and also in the world, hydrogen energy as an industry does not yet have the capacity to be scaled up in a commercially viable manner. But we have already entered a threshold where there are pilot programs, and some of these pilot programs have shown very good economic promise in reducing cost of production. And in the energy environment aspect of things, it is also very promising. And from these aspects, we need to be stronger in our determination in the growth, and also realize that there is still very clear potential for the industry to grow. It is a very good method. Secondly, within China hydrogen energy is already in the process of creating a demand. For example, the upcoming Winter Olympics, there are already scenarios that have been created for the use of hydrogen. Academician Li Can has already started to look at SME and also look at the production of hydrogen using steam methane. And in addition to the Winter Olympics, many cities, including Beijing and also Shandong, as Ms. Zhang Zhen had mentioned, had promoted plans to develop hydrogen energy. And in Beijing, in districts such as in Changping, there has been district-wide policies. In industry clusters such as the Yizhuang Development Zone, there are policies to create further demand, providing preferential policies, including land use subsidies and other forms of industry support to make sure this would happen. And Shandong has very strong foundation as well for green hydrogen, not for green hydrogen, but for gray and blue hydrogen. There is very good conditions for industry scale hydrogen making. There are also some other choices to be made. We can't really hope to achieve green hydrogen in one big stride. We can actually look at gray hydrogen first, using the existing industries to create hydrogen. At the same time, we can look at the development of green hydrogen. With these many different types of production in the next 5 to 10 years, there might be more opportunities for large-scale production and commercialization in this industry. Nationally speaking, there are many cities that already have very good foundations to develop the industry in Beijing, in Shandong, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, and many more cities. We do have the solid foundation for it, and people are looking for suitable pathways to develop hydrogen energy. In Shanxi province, for example, they can start from a traditional coal-producing province. And also in places where there is a rich natural gas reservoir, they can think about the development of hydrogen as well. In many places, for example, in the north of China, there are bases for solar PV and wind power. They can also think about using green electricity to produce green hydrogen. All of these can show us that we have already come into the preliminary stage of commercialization of hydrogen energy. So from the Chinese practice, we can see that in the next few years, it is a real possibility, for example, around 2025, to have pilot programs of commercial sizes for hydrogen energy, and perhaps the real beginning of hydrogen power commercialization. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Liu. He had also mentioned that the commercialization of green hydrogen is still not yet mature. I would like to give the floor to Tobias, who has spoken to us before. In the keynote part, we would like to ask him what sort of assisting or boosters for hydrogen power to become commercialized. He talked about how Shell is using a all industry chain approach. Can you share with us a little bit more details as to are we at the cusp of commercialization of hydrogen energy, or is there still a long way to go? Thank you. Thank you very much, Isadora. Are we at the cusp? Some of the previous speakers have already said that we are not at the cusp at all. There's still a long way to go. Technically speaking, they have also talked about this. In the policy side, I believe there are several points that needs to be emphasized on. First of all, if we wanted to have a large-scale hydrogen energy, especially green hydrogen, we cannot rely solely on the market powers. It is not realistic. We must rely on government support. Internationally, many governments have used regional or national clean energy and hydrogen energy strategy as part of their energy transition. The top-down design is very, very important. Europe, America, Korea, and Japan have in the past 2 or 3 years released their hydrogen energy development plan and had speed up the hydrogen industry in other countries. Within China, many different ministries have been working on drafting the plans, but it would require a long discussion, and we look forward to the launching of these national level policies. We believe it would help break through the bottleneck at the moment for commercialization of hydrogen. The second point had also been mentioned by many previous experts. To set up industry-wide standards for green and blue hydrogen, especially the accounting systems for carbon dioxide emission that is avoided by using hydrogen, and create a direct link with carbon prices, because only when we can incorporate carbon price can we fully realize the value of green and blue hydrogen. The third point is, in terms of financial support to pilot programs, especially with the incentives into the building of infrastructure. At the very beginning of this industry development, in each of the links, all the costs are high. So we actually do not enjoy the benefits of economy of scale. So we do need to help the industry to go through that bottleneck stage by supporting it more. With the pilot city clusters, we are already looking at the first cohort of cities that are going to be the pilot regions, which included Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, as well as the Yangtze and Pearl River deltas. And finally, with industry use, especially with heavy-duty transportation, these sectors will see it as very difficult to reduce carbon emission. So these sectors will be the major demand for hydrogen utilization. And at the moment, it is mainly used in logistic vehicles, major big buses and heavy-duty cars. But in other countries, this has already been expanded to drones, to ships, as well as other vehicles. So we can try and expand the scenario of application to help improve the chances for this industry. Thank you. These are from macro aspects. Thank you very much, Tobias, for that. At the venue with us, we have invited Ms. Wang from Xi'an to share with us some of her ideas. Her company is one of the actual players in the industry sector and has a lot of wide-ranging corporations in this area. So can you share with us what your thoughts are on the obstacles before the company becomes, before the industry becomes commercialized? Thank you very much. We've only just entered this green hydrogen industry, and we're working in equipment aspect. So we are at the upper stream of the industry. First of all, what I would like to say here is, as we grow hydrogen industry, like Professor Mao had mentioned, we need to look at the philosophy and ethics. The reason why we wanted to develop the hydrogen industry is because we want to reduce carbon emission. If we forget that, then the effort in this industry is actually meaningless. In the past, we create hydrogen through coal and other industry processes. If we are going to continue to go along those old paths, the demands for hydrogen is not really going to help us to reduce carbon emission. So in the production of hydrogen, the entire process, the carbon footprint, all of these need to be measured and monitored. We need it to be green. So as we talk about the other fossil fuels created hydrogen, these are not going to be supported in the logical aspect. because this will continue to increase carbon emission. In our strategic plans, it has been, first of all, clarified the definition of green hydrogen. There are 2 documents from the central government. The 1+N suite of policies have already come out and pointed us towards a very clear direction by the central government. Regretfully, the local plans have not yet had a very clear understanding on how this industry should develop.
Second, we've been talking about short-term versus the mid and long-term market. Well, as a company, we look at market as the first thing the market needs. The demand to be met from a close distance, especially for the Western China, and they've got really good solar resources, and there are plants that need hydrogen, for example, or in Mongolia, and because we have the 4 on the largest industrial plants in China, and I think that's where we can have green hydrogen plants first. In Mongolia actually is leading in terms of hydrogen production in China, and I think they've already set very good examples for the rest of China. Next is about the cost of hydrogen production. There are a lot of academic discussions about that already, and now in China with good solar, for example, in Xinjiang, if the PV cost of a generation is about 20 cents, then the hydrogen is around 18 to 19 yuan per kilo. That is the current cost of it for PV. On if the component and the components are already more than 2 yuan per unit, so it is rising. But I think the rising trend will actually be reverted next year. And so, and for coal produced hydrogen, now the cost is around 15 to 19 yuan per kilo, and with a very good the solar and the electrolysis cost is almost the same as the coal produced hydrogen. And so now the coal produced hydrogen cost is around is very low, but the carbon cost in China is about 50 yuan per ton. And if the Chinese carbon cost is as high as Europe, then the hydrogen cost will rise by about 10 yuan per kilo. And so about green hydrogen, I think we need more the cost reduction, and the next is about the carbon trade, and we need more buyers and sellers so that the carbon price itself can be more reasonable and economical. And so for us, I think for civil engineering, I can expect the carbon price to reach 100 RMB per ton based on recent trends. And next, in general, I think the position of the green hydrogen is could use the renewables. So green hydrogen can be priced. If we let's say if we price it with 20, they should be around 20, and so that requires policy. So policymakers can price green hydrogen the same way that renewables were priced in the past. And this is another factor that we can consider. And similar things were done to methanol in the past, and also for Baotou, Erdal, and other cities in Mongolia, and for these coal chemical plants, and we can actually support their development with large green hydrogen plants that are in the gigawatt level. On Xi Jinping, China's president of China, already mentioned that we could build megawatt green hydrogen plants, and he specifically mentioned the importance of green electricity, and I think green hydrogen could precisely help with the green electricity goal proposed by the Chinese president. And I think industrial application should definitely be prioritized for example, ammonia and and ammonia actually now is not very expensive, and also for methanol. And for a lot of large projects in Yulin and Shanxi province, and they already have the foundation for hydrogen plants to be built. And next is hydrogen being used for energy storage and peak shaving on the grid. There are already pilots and that can be mass applied next year, especially for peak shaving in the grid. And the next is metallurgical application, which is in the long run that requires a lot of retrofitting of existing infrastructure. But we see on without hydrogen, carbon emission goals cannot be achieved. Well, policy definitely needs to take the dominant role. I don't know about the other countries, but for China, hydrogen definitely will develop the fastest. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wang, for this sharing on a lot of the experts mentioned the hydrogen production in China and its great potential. As Mr. Wang said, downstream market is also very important. In this landscape, we're very glad to have Mr. Chen Xi from RMI Rocky Mountain Institute who traveled from Beijing. So, Dr. Chen, could you please share with us for the carbon-intensive industries, what is, for example, metallurgical or methanol or on ammonia? What is the future for green hydrogen? Thank you for the invitation. I'm Chen Xi. I'm with the Beijing representative at RMI. RMI is very similar to Agora, which is an international think tank focused on energy. I think everything I want to say has already been said by Mr. Wang. Exactly, we've been dedicated to energy transition in China. We focus more specifically on hydrogen and on decarbonization of heavy industries. And these two are combined as one topic because, as many experts mentioned, we think hydrogen, and if to be mass applied, needs, the demand from industries. We launched a report which is on the roadmap of green hydrogen in China. We did estimate the forecast for a zero carbon on scenario by 2050. Hydrogen energy's demand is about 8,100 tons, and with for the Hydrogen Association in China, they said it's 131 million tons by 2060. So there is a difference between our forecast, but half of that demand will come from industrial applications. Lots of experts already mentioned, ammonia, methanol, on steel making, and other heavy industries. The reason for that the conclusion, which is shared by a lot of our partners, is that industry will need a lot of hydrogen. At least that's our understanding. First, it is related to transportation. Compared to other sectors, as Agora experts mentioned, no regret hydrogen. And they don't have any other alternatives. Speaking of transportation, there is fuel cell and lithium ion batteries. But for the electricity, as what Mr. Wang said, and we need the flexibility in the system and energy storage, especially long-term energy storage. They have other alternatives, and of course, for instance, the liquefied batteries, etc. And so the hydrogen fuel cell and the combustion of hydrogen can be used for higher flexibility in the system, and the problems are cost anyway. But the thing is, when it comes to industrial application, there are no other alternatives. If they want to do zero carbon, if they want neutrality by 2060, industries can only go to hydrogen. There is a problem with technical sophistication. Nevertheless, they have to choose hydrogen. And also, we looked at some things that are more specific. And as the Agora expert already mentioned, on the one hand, is hydrogen as fuel for the industries. There is the high grade heat. Well, we already have furnace, electric furnace that can reach 1,000, 2,000 degrees, but there's a cost problem. And now furnaces are usually used for refined manufacturing, on which is on to which has very strict technical requirements, and they're not used for producing massive high grade heat. And as raw materials or fuel, hydrogen is a even better substitute to, for example, reductive materials like we discussed. In Europe and the United States, they use natural gas. In China, we use coke. And it is very difficult to find other substitutes, and especially for the coal chemical industry. I'm not an expert, but my understanding is this coal chemistry is actually is gasifying because of hydrogen production. If we could find cleaner sources, then there is a good potential. Next is power or electricity. If we could use the fuel cell in energy storage or burn it directly for energy storage, then we think it also is not the dominant solution for flexibility, but rather because of its application in industry, we could just store and produce a lot of hydrogen that actually, after you have that hydrogen, you can increase the flexibility in meeting the demand of industries. That makes it easier for hydrogen to actually increase the flexibility in the electricity system. At least this is a more economical and viable solution. Another good industrial application is about the price that we discussed. It's actually it's a very good option. Well, this is mentioned in the report. I think Ms. Wang Li is just rushing me the whole time. I just want to say that take a steel, for example, when it's less than 10 RMB per kilo, well, without the carbon price included, hydrogen can already compete with traditional fuels. And method needs to be lower. But of course, if we look at transportation sector, especially passenger vehicles, ships, shipping and aviation, the cost of green hydrogen needs to be even lower. The carbon pricing was mentioned a couple of times. Well, the carbon price has a faster impact on industrial applications, I believe. And first of all, we see in the Chinese carbon market that industrial sectors will be included very soon. And also there's the border carbon tax, and which is more urgent. And the next thing is
why do we need to have a scaled up industrialized hydrogen system? This is because the application in the industries would be large scale, and only when we use it in industries will we be able to promote the whole industry chain development for hydrogen energy, because we know there are many, for example, if you're 2C with passenger vehicles, you need to really encourage more consumer demand. You need to provide subsidies even. But it is very possible that if we wanted to provide support to an industry from the supply side, it would usually be more effective. For example, with the 1.5 million tons of DRI with national subsidies or local subsidies. And as soon as the project starts, your demand for hydrogen will increase, and that will have a lot of positive effect for the lower stream parts of the industry chain. So overall speaking, we believe to cultivate a demand in the industries will be key to the development of hydrogen energy. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Chen. Because of the time constraint, I can't let him continue with his sharing, but he had touched upon several very important points. The industry development for hydrogen would rely on large-scale industry applications. Last month, we went to Shandong, and we had also looked at factories that had produced membrane production of hydrogen. This is actually a very realistic question for them to not have enough demand. Dr. Chen said if it is 2C, then the lower stream promotion will have some effect towards the upper stream businesses. Our next speaker is Li Lei, Director of Strategic Research, Shanghai Petroleum and Gas Exchange. Good afternoon. My name is Li Lei. I'm from the Shanghai Petroleum and Gas Exchange. We are in the gas industry. I am here learning from all of you. We don't know quite a lot about hydrogen, but after I've listened to all of you, I've found there are some commonalities between gas and hydrogen, because the scenarios the gas suppliers are facing would be quite similar, I guess, to the situations that hydrogen industry players will be facing in 20 or 30 years' time. For the gas industry, the biggest concern that we have is the replacement of gas by alternative energies. We are actually part of the more traditional cohort of energies like the coal and oil. Overall speaking, we feel that hydrogen plays three major roles. One is the resources that would help with the carbon reduction, and secondly, it can help promote a large-scale consumption of renewables. So these are a coupling effect. And the next is that it would be complementing or supplementing fossil fuel. So in terms of renewables, this would be beneficial to the development of renewables, taking a larger percentage in the energy mix. And in terms of demand, I think there are several industries. We have construction and transportation, as well as electricity. A while back, we had spoken to the NDRC, and they have done a prospect on the hydrogen energy in China. To 2060, there's going to be 70 million tons to 120 million tons of energy consumption, and the largest part would be industry, which is 82 million. Transportation would use a lot less energy than we imagine, because there are more and more pure electric vehicles in transportation. It's going to be 12 to 21 million tons for transportation. And we would have the heavy-duty trucks taking about 4 million to 8 million tons, which is the largest segment in this industry. And also there is another issue. I have been thinking about this issue for a while. It might not be accurate. Should there be large-scale electricity generation and then we produce hydrogen on site, or should it be the other way around? I personally believe that we should have a base production of electricity, and at the consumer end, we should be producing hydrogen. I believe it is more effective. And also, in China, we actually have a rich reservoir of coal, and we don't have a very strong supply for oil and gas. So hydrogen could actually be a very good supplementary source of energy. the sense of economy or the commercial viability would be the most important point here. At the same time, I feel that natural gas industry and hydrogen industry should pay attention to the same question, which is the energy storage technology breakthroughs and changes. This would be the biggest impact on our two industries. And finally, the Stone Age finished did not because they ran out of stones. It is because more advanced technologies came out and replaced the technologies in the Stone Age. So I believe hydrogen will continue to grow, and it will take a further it will make a further improvement. Thank you very much, Mr. Li. We had a question from online about the gas and hydrogen industry. The question is, the gas industry role and opportunity in the development of hydrogen industry. Actually, many people said that you can create hydrogen from gas, but I believe if the procedures become longer, the efficiency of energy use would be reduced, and that's a certainty. And for hydrogen development, I believe there needs to be an acquisition that is commercially viable, which means it needs to be matched to the development of renewables. If we don't talk about renewables, just talking about green hydrogen would not be feasible. And if we are producing hydrogen with gas, it is not realistic within a short period, because at the time we actually have a very tight supply of gas. So using it to produce hydrogen would be even less feasible. Perhaps we should be very prudent in starting large-scale gas production of hydrogen projects. In the future, perhaps this might change. Well, thank you very much. I personally believe that gas hydrogen is not a very good option, because in China, the supply meant we need to import, and the price is therefore very high. Agora colleague Matthias had also mentioned the green and blue pathways for hydrogen making in Europe. He talked about the SMR CSS methods, and this can be discussed further. We talked about upper stream and lower stream. I would like to also invite the on-site experts to talk about it from an investor's perspective. Especially the carbon price is not high enough now in China. In the future, we hope that the large-scale application of green hydrogen would become possible. So from an investor perspective, what sort of balancing acts would you be performing? We would like to give the floor first to Mr. Zhang Jie, Secretary General of Energy Investment Professional Committee of IAC, to speak. Thank you, moderator. Most recently, I am paying more attention to hydrogen products, especially the development of green hydrogen. We made some calculations. 1 cubic meter of the hydrogen, 1 ton of hydrogen would be 11,000 cubic meters. And it would use a very high electricity cost if it is produced by electricity. So it would be around 9,000 yuan to 10,000 yuan if the electricity price is 0.0 yuan per kilowatt hour. So the cost would be too high. In terms of solar PV, annual production of hydrogen of 300,000 tons would be using 15 billion kilowatt hours of electricity. And so the carbon emission could not really be ignored.
也就是说，这个价格如果按照现有的40块钱一吨算的话，那这个价值可以达到100亿。我们总的大概1000万投资这一块大概多少钱呢？目前为止大概是300亿。
In terms of investment, at the moment it is 30 billion RMB, 1/3.
如果按照欧洲的公元来算的话，那就但是有一个问题，就是说
there will be a problem with it because we need to think about the goal of zero carbon emission. So in the future, are we going to be continuing to focus on the zero carbon nature of green hydrogen? These are the questions we really need to think about as investors. In terms of the future development of hydrogen, experts have already talked about many different roadmaps. I believe I would agree with several points where there needs to be industrialized supply as industry fuel and as industry raw material. So last year, with 33 million tons of hydrogen produced, a huge amount of that had been used to produce methanol, and that is a huge demand for hydrogen, or at least a huge consumption for hydrogen produced here in China. And why is it we say that in the future this has the potential of replacing the coal chemical industry? This is because we're going to continue to focus on the development of green hydrogen, looking at its potential to really replace the industries that are using coal. The coal chemical industries are producing a lot of nitrogen oxides, which continue to pollute the environment. And ammonia can actually be produced and can be transported quite easily. And this can actually be transported to the areas where this is needed to resolve a lot of shortage issues. In terms of industry fuel, we believe in the future power will be more distributed. And hydrogen fuel batteries will go into the industry parks as well as households, and the efficiency will exceed 90%, which will further reduce its cost. And I believe this is the trend and direction for this industry to develop. And the third application will be in the transportation industry. We talk about the water transportation as well as in the air and on the roads. We believe that hydrogen plays a bigger role, can play a bigger role in the oceans as well as in the skies compared to what they can do on the road. In the past 20 years, a lot of energy and investment had gone into electric cars. So it is a very long period of development. And if you wanted to develop vehicles using hydrogen batteries, this would be a high risk, and this would have to lag behind the e-vehicles. And this is the reason why I believe it would play a bigger role in the other spaces, including the water transportation space and air transportation space. And also, we're looking at e-vehicles now moving towards automated driving direction, and that would also give it a competitive edge. And we would also be able to enjoy the future free electricity storage facilities from the grid. In the short period, in the short time frame, if hydrogen vehicles wanted to compete with the e-vehicles, it wouldn't be very feasible in my perspective. So in industries and in transportation, I believe this will be the future for investment into the hydrogen industry. Thank you very much. Now we would like to give the floor to Dr. Wu Zhu, Chief Investment Officer of China U.S. Green Fund. I am Wu Zhu. It is very good to have this opportunity to speak with you. 10 years ago, I've already built a hydrogen station for the expo in Shanghai. And this year, we have also invested in the Winter Olympics. So I find it very interesting 10 years before and now. China now has a double carbon goals. I believe there is an alternative technical pathway. For example, with carbon peaking, we need to reduce coal mix from more than 50% to around 30%. And a huge amount of the electricity must be generated with a clean energy source and also gas fuel. And hydrogen would play a main role. will play the role of an alternative source or supplementary source. And there is a limitation to the type of scenarios hydrogen can be put into use. In the United States, there are 2,700 kilometers long of hydrogen pipelines. And in China, where there is a richness of clean energy, these regions might take up lessons from the United States and build pipelines as well. And these clusters will then enjoy better efficiency. And secondly, hydrogen is distributed. A distributed type of power is actually very flexible and versatile. And there are many competition for hydrogen in the mid-power and mid-efficiency range, but because it can achieve low-temperature startup as well as its cleanness, the hydrogen batteries for in the future will be able to play a very positive role in helping its development and rollout. At the moment, if we're actually burning gas in households in China to use it for cooking and heating. At the user end, we can actually try and explore more room for the application of hydrogen. In Japan, there has been sales of more than 1 million units of solar PV and hydrogen units to the households. And we believe this is also an area where hydrogen would enjoy a lot of opportunity. I believe we have always been paying attention to how hydrogen can be used in different scenarios, such as in vehicles. And secondly, hydrogen, in terms of storage and transportation, there is still a lot more things to be done. In China, we believe that low-cost hydrogen is quite possible.
For 1 ton of liquefied hydrogen, it costs 16 to 18 kilowatt hour of electricity, but in developed countries, it's only 10, so we're 60% higher. That is why we should not just focus on clean energy and electricity. Well, when clean power is supplied, it definitely will be very important. And so for liquefied hydrogen facilities, it needs to develop. And also we need to compress the gas, the hydrogen gas. And it requires very high grade of materials. And next area for investment could be when hydrogen, I'm sorry, the sound quality is really bad. And as the Chinese, natural gas in China is in relatively short supply, hydrogen could be a very good supplement. This year, we managed to launch 2 hydrogen projects. One of them is on the reactors using hydrogen. Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. I agree that the application of hydrogen could actually be a very good solution in terms for electrification of transportation. And we just talked about the production of hydrogen. And next is on the storage and transportation of hydrogen. And according to the development plan of the country, it is very important. And in China, we often talk about the reasonable allocation of the resources. So now let's give the floor to Miss Dr. Liu Qiang. So Dr. Liu, what is your suggestion in terms of resource distribution for the mass adoption of the hydrogen? And please, Dr. Liu. Thank you. Azadora, that's a very challenging question indeed. What about resource allocation? I think, well, how to put it? Well, from the perspective of economics, I think the industry requires a lot of resources indeed, but based on our historical experience on especially with wind and photovoltaic, we've learned lessons the hard way. And we also drew great experiences in the processes of the mistakes that were not for nothing. And for the renewables in China, everyone can see the amazing results we have already achieved when we've developed the fastest. But can we replicate such a miracle in the hydrogen sector to avoid the past mistakes and achieve heights as well? Well, that is definitely the challenge. And we can see a lot of similarities already. The major technology breakthroughs when it comes to the hydrogen and also are on here on but in China, the advantage is the on a mega market size, which is definitely one of the biggest the advantage of China. And at such a crucial point for hydrogen, perhaps China will utilize that advantage again to create an extremely efficient market with the industries serving as the foundation. So two advantages that I can see. First is the mega market. The second is that China has one of the most comprehensive industrial system, which covers basically all industrial sectors that there is. Take Shandong province, for example, it already has all the 31 sectors. So the industrial foundation in China is the best in the world. And whichever sector we start with, there is always the great industrial foundation. And so we need to create a market for hydrogen, which is one. And the second, we need industrial foundation for hydrogen to develop. And the third is on the policy side. I think many of you, when thinking about policy, would be on subsidies, but subsidy is just one of the many policy factors, and on economic actually do not always encourage subsidy because that is bending the market norm. I'm not saying a subsidy should not be provided, but there must be exit mechanism in place. In the past, we already learned from PV, which was first supported by the taxation system, including the tax breaks and also subsidies. And then all of a sudden, the government found that to be too unaffordable. I don't know the government. I don't know whether the government has already, paid off all the debts, but there must be a reasonable subsidy program, including the exit program in place. And for the beginning, I think standards are required. The standards need to be flexible and adaptive. We should not have standards to curb the further development of industry. We learned these lessons in the past as well. So when it comes to hydrogen, perhaps on the access of hydrogen, we should not put limitations on whether it must be green or blue or gray. Well, first, let's have the industry chain first. Well, we need a comprehensive industry chain to be established, and then we should shift our attention to cost reduction and consider the factor of coal. We need to have the industry first, and then talk about efficiency and cost and the carbon neutrality, etc. So that is the second factor about policy. We need to encourage the industry to develop instead of limiting it from the beginning. And the next is standards about safety for any given industry. In terms of regulation, we need just two things. First, environmental factor. So things should not be too polluting. And the second would be a safety regulations. And we can learn from other industries in this regard. Take lithium ion batteries, the safety standards, and energy storage standards. This year, we've already seen at least two incidents where the lithium ion batteries used for energy storage to have a major safety problems. So 2 safety accidents already this year. So we need a very good standards. And first of all, these standards should not increase the cost for businesses, but on the other hand, to provide guarantee for the safety operations, especially in places where the population is dense, where the pipelines pass, where the trunks on the path. We need to avoid refueling stations. And we also need to have a planning on ahead on what these are on the policy side, and about when it comes to other resources such as for R&D, we need support as well. We've learned lessons on in the past about R&D. We need the policy mechanisms from the central level, but we also need the innovation. And we've already seen from other countries that innovation often comes from the private sector, which means that we need to encourage private sectors to innovate. We also need to encourage a collaboration between the private sector and academic institutions such as CAS, Chinese Academy as Sciences, but CAS itself is not enough. And we need joint efforts between the academia and the private sector in order for implementable technologies and applicable technologies to come about. Thank you very much, Dr. Liu, for the wonderful sharing. And Dr. Liu talked about policy resources, also subsidies, which need to come with the exit mechanisms, and also on the collaboration between the industry and academia when it comes to the application of green hydrogen. And green hydrogen itself can create a lot of new opportunities, for example, on the employment side, and that helps to balance the labor market after the energy intensive and the carbon intensive industries start to decrease in size in the future. In the interest of time, we will give the floor to Mr. Drew from Agora for a conclusion, and the person we originally arranged for the conclusion and remarks is not able to make here, which is Mr. Sun Yao Wei from IAC. So we now give the floor to. I'm sorry, the sound quality is very poor. The interpreter cannot hear. As the old Chinese saying goes, changes happen faster than plans. We're very honored to have distinguished guests and experts who joined our workshop today.
所以完美的错过呢今天的这场会呢，而那个Patrick 也临时无法参会啊，所以受本次
Patrick is not able to make here today. We apologize for that. Well, I'm going to make the conclusion remarks on behalf of the organizers. First, workshop organized by Agora, SIS, GZ, and IAC has been successfully convened both online and offline thanks to the concerted efforts of all the stakeholders, as I mentioned, due to the pandemic. The way we live and work has been fundamentally changed. I'm sorry, I just was told that Patrick is already online, and so I am only speaking on behalf of Mr. Sun from ISB, and Dr. Patrick will make the conclusion remark after me. So the way that we live and work has been fundamentally challenged, and I've got another good news to share with you. Even though we only have a handful of people that made it offline, but I heard that more than 15,000 people already are watching our event online through the live stream. And so, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Sun from IIAC and also Mr. Samati, the counselor from the EU delegation to China, to share the great presentations about the energy transition in China and Europe in the opening remarks, and they paved a very good foundation and painted the undertone for the following sessions. And after on Dr. Yu's and Professor Mao and Mr. Chen and from Shell and Mr. Jai from Tencent and ADB, and also Dr. Matthias Deutsche from Agara. We've witnessed a very splendid keynote session, and we learned about the status quo of the green hydrogen industry in Europe, including infrastructure and investment landscape. And after that, we heard from Dr. Wang from Agora.
We have also heard from Ms. Zhang Zhen from the China EV 100, and they've all spoken about the regional perspective on green hydrogen industry. And we have also then after that heard how the industry will look to develop, seeing that the current status is that the industry environment is not that mature. After all of these experts sharing, I have found that we now have a much better understanding of the current situation. In the beginning remarks, I have mentioned how in the Earth's atmosphere, we don't have any hydrogen, and because of the chemical activity of hydrogen, we do not have any natural hydrogen that we can actually use. And according to domestic and international research, if we wanted to use green hydrogen to reduce carbon emission, there is still a lot of obstacles and challenges. And so for the economic development of green hydrogen, different parties need to have a clear understanding of these obstacles and bottlenecks and make sure that we effectively counter such challenges to make sure that the green hydrogen is indeed green. We also will need to pay attention to avoiding the finance and support go into this industry in an irrational manner. In China's double carbon goals, 2030 is the peaking year and 2060 is the neutrality year. And whether or not we can realize the economy of scale for green industry, we can actually try and find the answers through looking back to the development of green energy development here in China. We have a very strong market potential for e-vehicles. Is it also possible that there will be a strong and healthy demand for hydrogen vehicles and other applications of hydrogen? We had talked about the different stages of energy transition. For example, in the very beginning of human history, we have used wood and coal. We do not now have the golden age for natural gas, as was mentioned by the NEA. But we are looking at the use of green hydrogen, where hydrogen would not produce any carbon emission. So even though there is still a very long way before we can make an industrial scale application of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a very important link in the future development of China and the world. So research institutes and other agencies need to pay a lot of attention to research into these difficult questions. In China, we say the revolution has not achieved victory and everyone still needs to work hard toward it. I have found that during the pandemic, we were not able to meet face to face. And today, a lot of the lifestyles have changed, the way we work had changed, and the way we meet had changed. In China, we say that good friends need to have been had a drink together, have studied together in the same classroom, or perhaps fought in the same trench. But in the future, we must add good friends must have had meetings together online during the pandemic. And I believe that is a new layer to our modern life now under the pandemic. I would like to now give the floor to Dr. Patrick Gratian, Executive Director of Agora, to give some concluding remarks.
Yes, thank you, Kevin, and distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. Good morning in Germany, good afternoon in China. I'm glad that this workshop was so full of insights on where we are heading for a green hydrogen economy. And indeed, a lot of things are happening all over the world. We know that hydrogen is going to be the next big fuel. We will build lots of renewables. Wind and solar are now all around the globe the cheapest source of electricity. And we have all committed to climate neutrality. In the German context, this is 2045, which is only 23 years away. And that in essence means we need a fuel for those sectors which we cannot electrify. And that's going to be green hydrogen, where we see lots and lots of movement in the past months and years. And I think this is a different time than I heard the colleague saying that 10 years ago he already built hydrogen station at an expo. I think this time we're not in the pilot phase anymore. This time it is going to be big time industry. And we're all in the beginning of a huge industrial revolution on hydrogen. We know that this will require cost reduction. It will require a lot of investment, but we're seeing it coming. Especially the steel sector is now all into hydrogen steel making. That is happening in Europe. It is happening in China. It is not yet commercial, but we will see that within the next 5 to 10 years, this will be the dominating technology on steel, because as we've just seen with steel arrangements around the world, steel needs to be, of course, also a carbon-free technology, and the way forward will be hydrogen-based direct reduction technologies. The same you can apply to others. For example, when it comes to shipping, when it comes to aviation, when it comes to the chemical industry, we'll need lots and lots of hydrogen. And I believe this is where the investments are going to go. Government is needed at this stage. We'll need standards, we need subsidies, we need to build infrastructure for that. Green procurement can be a first step to get lead markets off the ground. And of course, carbon pricing will play a crucial role in the European context, but I believe that this is also increasingly coming in the Chinese context. Now, saving our common globe, our common Earth, is a joint exercise of mankind. It doesn't matter where you live on this planet. If global heating well above 2 degrees hits us, it hits us anywhere. Which is why currently at Glasgow, the delegates are discussing at COP26 how to get down emissions and how to come as close as possible to limiting global warming at 1.5 degrees. This is an international cooperation indeed, and I think this is where we should be heading, not geopolitical rivalry, but rather a joint global energy transition. And in this context, green hydrogen will play a crucial role. I'm looking forward to more discussions because China and Germany, as leading industrial nations, will play a key role in this. As Kevin has said, friendship can endure Zoom meetings, but at the end of the day, we want to have face-to-face meetings again. And I hope that in 2022, we will be doing these conferences back in person. And I'm looking forward to visiting China and having Chinese friends coming over to Europe next year. Thank you.
非常感谢Patrick 的精彩。
Thank you very much, Patrick, for those wonderful remarks. A German friend had chosen to take time out of his wonderful weekend to participate in our discussion. Reminds me of Dr. Bethune, who traveled thousands of miles to China during the Second World War to help the Chinese military and the Chinese people. This is the spirit of international cooperation, and we believe with such a spirit, in the future, we will jointly make great progress in China and in Germany. And finally, even though we have to do this in a hybrid session of online and offline participants, in China, we have a saying where all good things go to an end. It doesn't matter if a meeting is on Zoom or offline, it will come to an end eventually. Before we finish, I would like to invite everyone here with us and everyone online. I would like to thank our joint sponsors, our team at Agora, Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, GIZ, and Energy Investment Professional Committee of Investment Association of China. Our meeting would not happen without your hard work. We also have many friends from the press, and we have simultaneous interpreters who have worked for 3 hours. Let us express our gratitude to them for their hard work. I pronounce this meeting concluded. Thank you very much. See you next time.